I'm coming from a company called Amplexer. We're a provider of regulatory quality and safety software solutions for pharma, biotech, and as well as medical device companies. And so here am I. I'm otherwise Director of Product Management for the Life Sciences Solution Suite. And feel free to contact me in case you would like to learn more about the topic later after this session.
I'll put people in touch with you.
Thank you. So today's topic is about regulatory systems and how to leverage them better in the context here of medical device industry, of course. And here are a couple of things that maybe we'd go through together with you today. First, a brief introduction, but we understand as regulatory information management is, and maybe we share or do not share completely the definition, but let's discuss. A little bit of insight of, similarities and differences among the device and pharma world, where we originally are coming from with our solutions. A couple of challenges that we detect with our work with the industries, and maybe let's see how they are recognized also with the medical device community. Same with the trends that we observe with our work. And in the end, of course, a brief walkthrough to our solution. We won't have time to go into much details, but let's just for introduction, see a little bit about our offering and capabilities, and maybe next time go more in depth about different topics. And in the end, hopefully we get something smart to conclude out of it.
Okay.
Sure. Okay, so regulatory information management, that's something that we support with our solutions. And basically, we are focusing on life sciences companies, and their need is to manage, control, and drive the process of basically releasing the products to the market and keeping them maintained in a compliant manner, up to date with all the information about their products, about their registration statuses, etc., throughout the complete lifespan. And how the systems can help here is they bring a set of capabilities that basically can support the companies to manage the submission relevant documentation, all the regulatory activities, all the interactions with health authorities, making sure that their submissions are compiled and consistent of all the parts that are required to meet the compliance requirements. There's also the labeling aspect of it. Managing labels is also important in medical device industry as well as it in pharma. And at the end, increasingly important, manage the data about the product information in a structured manner, in a much more detailed manner than it used to be in the past. As well as manage the complete registration data and content. And in this, let's say, context of the eyes that we have on this topic, let's see how maybe device and pharma worlds can be compared. We often hear some opinions like this, and I'm really interested how you'd react on this. Like medical devices are so different from the pharma products, and typically, they just don't want to hear, oh, it's different, it doesn't matter, it doesn't apply to us. It's also common to say that PLM systems are the key systems for the industry because everything is based on the manufacturing processes, not so much regulatory. On the other hand side, QMS is the baseline for the compliance. That's also something we hear a lot. So why do we need something in addition to be compliant with the regulatory requirements?
We had this conversation just a week or two ago with a guest about PLM, and I relate a story how a few years back, Joseph Anderson, who's my go-to person for quality, was the speaker, and I said, a new manufacturer, a startup, has to worry about everything. Is it going to pass submission? Is it got the right quality? Is there going to be a market for it? How all of the things that have to happen right up front. I said, I don't know what happens first. What do they have to focus on first? I said, I guess quality, because if you hurt somebody, that's not good, of course. I said, but true to myself as a marketer, I have to say marketing, not only because it's self-serving, but because if I don't have a customer need that I'm filling, then I don't have any sales. I said, in light of that, you talk about something like PLM. When do you really need to start that? And I'm sure PLM vendors will say, well, it's part of the integrate, but I can't focus on everything at once. I don't have a staff. I don't even, I'm on still, you know, I'm looking at friends and families, Series A. I can't do everything. So I'd ask you, Renato, what do you say to that?
It really depends on the stage of the company, I would say. Startup is only one subset of the market, maybe very specific, and maybe they have very, very, very specific needs. But for established companies, you know, keeping the products on the market safe and compliant is a necessity, right? Specifically when the regulation is changing and changing a lot globally, especially in Europe and US recently. And that's becoming somehow, I've watched a couple of recordings here, and it seems like becoming a nightmare for many companies because they're disrupting the established way of working, where things on the regulatory side were maybe much more simple, much less demanding, and suddenly those companies are facing serious problems.
If anyone on the call has experience either with PLM or a story where they didn't have it, and it really could have been helpful, raise your hand and I'll promote you. I'd like to hear it in perspective to his question. Okay, Rob, this will be interesting.
Okay, are we waiting for Rob?
Well, he seems to be there.
Yep.
Here we go. Sorry.
I just forget it. The default is to mute everything. Sorry.
Yeah.
We have a very large client that purchased a high-end PLM system called Polarion.
Do you know them, Renato?
Nope.
Okay.
We're not in PLM business, but we know it's important for the medical device industry.
Okay.
As companies are developing software and developing electronic hardware, it's very important to have a PLM system to manage the constant minor changes that occur to the software as patches and to the hardware as components become obsolete and they get replaced by newer versions of the same component. And most of those changes don't require any kind of regulatory submissions, but they do require management and revalidation by the company. It's the documentation and traceability of all that revalidation that makes the PLM system necessary. So in theory, you could wait until after you have regulatory approval and then implement a PLM system, but most electronic companies need to implement it earlier than that, even during the development process. And most software companies probably need to do it no later than launch. But companies that are making things like catheters, Band-Aids, products like that that have fewer components, the PLM system isn't nearly as important. The larger a company is, the more products you sell, the more you need a PLM system. So think of it really as configuration management. If you have 1,000 components to worry about, you probably need a PLM system. If you have 100 components, you can probably get by without one. But a single printed circuit board could have over 1,000 components. How are you going to maintain the configuration management of thousands of components per circuit board? And if you have a complicated device like a multi-parameter monitor system like Philips bedside monitor, you could have 5, 6, 7 boards in there, each with 1,000 components. There's no way spreadsheets are going to cut it. And so you would need a PLM system in those cases. And then if you extrapolate that, so you have to reconfigure all the same data for multiple international submissions and have each one in its own particular format, forget it. It just can't physically be done with any amount of human resources. It has to be done in an automated electronic way.
And Renato, I may have, I know you're not in the PLM system, pardon me, PLM business. Let me let you go to the next slide so the folks can have this in the context of what you do.
Sure. And I think that there's a point in this. And as we are going into comparison of pharma and devices, let me just address this last comment. In pharma, it's the same. You have a PLM system that drives the production and the technical side of it. and all the supply chain and all the bill of materials, etc., it's there. But from the regulatory perspective, there's only a subset that is really important, and it's more related to the let's say composition, the packaging, etc. But both worlds are slowly merging eventually. That's also true. That's also one of the trends. But okay, let's see how the evolution of regulatory requirements somehow looks if we take a look in the perspective of the last few decades. So let's start with the world of paper submissions, before 2000, let's say, and the standardization somehow started already there as CTD, so Common Technical Document standards came up in the pharma world, but also there were, technical files and 510K submissions that appeared at approximately same time frame with the medical device industry. And then the evolution went into the electronic submission with eCTD on the pharma side, and for example, eCopy on the device side, and then moving the trend towards current moment where data submission is the key element. And we're talking about IDMP in pharma world, we're talking about UDI and MDR, and maybe if we're talking about content structures, the STAT or IMDRF definition of the content. So we see that there is a clear trend across both industries and many similarities here. Maybe, some things came earlier, some things are more harmonized globally on the pharma side, but nevertheless, there is some resemblance, at least in my view, among both industries. But maybe we can have a look about a little bit more details. Here's an interesting chart from the Regulatory Information Management white paper based on a survey that was covering pharma, but also as well as device companies globally. It's the 2018 edition. And here we have some interesting aspects of efficiency of regulatory affairs among device and medicinal products or companies regarding submission management, health authority interactions, etc., labeling, regulatory intelligence. And we see slight, delay of medical device compared to the pharma world in terms of assumed efficiency.
May I ask? So by medicinal, yep, you mean pharma?
Pharma, yes, yes.
Yeah, and Luke asks, and that was the same question I have. What is the y-axis? So you're measuring efficiency, but what does that mean? Is that a metric? Is that how people answered the question? Do you think you're efficient? What?
Yes, that's based on a survey, and it was a scale, I don't know, from 0 to 100, and this is somehow compared to that scale, yes.
So it's an entirely qualitative measure. Okay.
Yes, and of course there's one category that sticks out, that's design history file, which is naturally only covered by the device, because it's specific to the device. Yeah. And there might be some bias into it because this survey is originally coming from pharma and later incorporated also device elements and device companies. So it's also possible that majority of the companies have both products in the portfolio and they can compare them both elements.
Okay.
Another interesting thing is organizational responsibility about devices versus pharma responsibility for regulatory affairs. And here we see a big discrepancy that the pharma world is much more centralized in terms of managing the regulatory affairs compared to the device industry. And it has much more localized responsibility on the other side, even on the business unit or design center or a regional hub at least.
I'm curious, just a raise of hands, I won't promote you to panelist. If anyone on the call has what they consider to be deep or reasonable amount of experience in pharma, of course, Renato, this is a device group, so I don't know how, maybe it's a combination product or something. Anyone? So far, I see no hands. Okay, Rob. Rob's done some pharma stuff. But just so that you can tailor your comments accordingly, because I don't know how relevant the the pharmaceutical.
And I'm definitely interested for your feedback. Any even controversial reactions might be good, because this is a view from a certain survey, and let's hear different opinions on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then this is another chart. I think it's the last one here in the series about the comparison of device versus medicinal regulatory affairs data submission readiness, right? Whether the companies have some plans or will start within a couple of years, or they are ready and active in preparing the support for this. And of course, this is important in terms of EUDAMED in Europe, of course, but there are also other categories like structured product labeling. It's here specifically for the Canadian pharma standard, but may be applicable also for others. The rest of categories are purely pharma related.
I find this one a little more challenging to follow. Again, by show of hands, I see, love seeing Gary on the call. Kim's here, Michelle, if any of you, Ian is here. If any of you have a comment, you're welcome to raise your hand and I'll include you. But what's the point you're trying to make with this slide?
Okay, the point is that I'm supporting the arrow with the trends where the industry is moving toward data submission requirements, and the industry has to follow to stay compliant. So they have to eventually support on the pharma side IDMP submissions, on the medical device side UDI or EUDAMED submissions, etc. So that's basically an insight how much of the progress in the industry is already there. And that's the data from the 2020 survey. So it's already at least 1 year old, right? But there is a lot of companies already that have very active projects on the support of EUDAMED. Of course, they want to stay compliant, right?
All right, next.
Okay, and then the next section of our discussion is about the challenges. And here, again, I would like to hear if we share the views on the challenges, how common they are also for the med device industry. Let's see first the submission content management, right? We see a lot of cases where submission documents are simply copied around in multiple copies. There's no single source of truth in that regard. And there's not even a standard process or tool to handle this. So using various file shares, sending over emails, etc. When we speak about authoring review process, again, we can speak about different levels of efficiency with many rework loops and not utilizing modern ways of doing it like collaborative authoring, etc. Access control, again, may be, especially in large organizations, an issue when you have different product lines with potentially strict separation of access requirements, etc. Traceability. How can you trace the changes in documentation from one version to another version? Relations among those. And at the end, submission readiness. If you produce a document in a Word format, at the end you need a PDF. How do you deal with that? Is the system taking care of it automatically? You have to manually convert each time, etc. And in the end, clear visibility of document reuse might be a challenge as well. So you have your registrations globally for your products. Which of those have been updated using which documentation at which point in time is a difficult question without using a proper tool set. And then we move into the submission and registration management challenges. Here we move to the next level, and you have clear overview of your worldwide regulatory activities, where I am with different authorities in the process of registration. Processes seems to be disconnected a lot of times. Many process handovers, procedural workarounds, because the tools don't really seamlessly support the process. Another topic might be, especially in larger organizations where your affiliates are not fully empowered by the system. And again, we go back to a couple of slides before when you said, using emails to send things over, using file shares, and losing the golden record basically with the additional copies. Then it's about dispersed correspondence with health authorities. Sometimes it is really important what you have communicated with the authority, and you have to stay behind that statement. And later on, these records might be very important. In the end, it sums up also that the key thing is, unless you have a comprehensive source of truth for your submission, it's very difficult to deal with the clear and compliant situation with your registrations of the medical devices globally.
This is sounding like an argument for PLM.
Good. And here we are about the discussion, what PLM covers and not covers, right? Is it about, configuration management, as we heard before, or it's about having the complete product details, including all the documentation, right? Okay, then about the product information management. It's very close to PLM topic, maybe the closest of all here. So we have
friend Ian to join us. He just left us a comment, so I thought he can contribute it. Besides, I haven't seen him in a few months.
Old friend Ian.
Hey, Ian.
Hi, very good.
Hi, Ian.
Hi. As everyone knows, I've been involved in this space for a long time, and I think it is really important data now. Why? Because of COVID. If you think about COVID, typically what happens is a drug takes 10 years to bring to market, or a medical device takes 10 years. Now, we've just seen that they're bringing drugs to market in 10 months. So I think the way things are going, more and more pharma companies, more and more companies like med device companies are going to be having to get their data in the right way, whether that be RIM systems or whatever they decide to use. It's critical to get that data right, because they're going to have to submit to the FDA in smooth ways. And the key to making this happen will be systems, effective systems, single sources of truth, and they won't be able to have errors. So if you think 80% of the drug development will be saved, the costs, if you bring it together in 2 months, that's a huge amount of money. So they will have money available to invest in these systems, and we're seeing it happening all the way. There was one, so that's my thoughts.
I'd love to have a hand or two raised, because this speed to market, which has been unprecedented, I very much associate with pandemic and emergency use. Until you mentioned this, and I'd be very interested to hear someone else's point of view, I haven't for a moment assumed that now everything is going to change and everything is going to be faster. We want it to be faster, but FDA, for example, is no better staffed, as I understand it, than before. So I don't know why we think everything is going to be that expedited. Of course, we want to be efficient. Of course, we want to have the right systems, but I don't know that I would draw the conclusion that things are going to be faster and therefore you need it. John, do you have a view on this?
Yeah, I also work in the aerospace industry, as well as medical device. In fact, my original background before I got in medical devices was European Space Agency and NASA. And one of the things they have done is they've moved into the area that Ian is sort of hinting at, what he's calling the single source of truth, which is the software, or it's moving into digital techniques rather than the old school approach of using configuration management and old types of PLM systems. The aerospace industry is moving fast into this. They're using companies like Siemens, PTC, ARAS, that are actually helping get all of this into one place in a much faster way. I think, Ian, would you agree?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I've recently moved from, I used to be within Amplexer, and I've worked within the RIM space. I'm now head of a business unit for FME, and that's all around data. And
sorry, I don't recognize that acronym, FME.
Yeah, it's a German company. Their claim to fame is they work very closely with VW. That's the biggest one that they work with. But then on top of that, they're in the life science market. And they are seeing this with a variety of companies, that it's data, and it's structuring the data, and it's going from your PLM or other systems and such. And the aviation industry's led the way, and the motor industry's led the way as well. So I think there's a lot that can be learned. The smart...
The FDA recently bought, as a showcase, the Siemens system.
Yeah. There was a paper written about that, actually. Yeah, I read some of that. That was quite interesting. Yeah. I think there's a lot that can be learned in the pharmaceutical industry. Is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And you say the question about, well, do you think drug development will actually happen like that? Well, let's go back to what actually caused this to happen in the first place. If we think of Ebola, which was the worst problem we had before, that was Murray Lampin, who worked for the Bill Gates Foundation, who fast-tracked that drug. And that's the first time ever that they've gone that quickly with the drug to market. Otherwise, it would have been a population. That was the first time it was done. And then from there, they've done it with coronavirus. Look what's happening now. They're saying there's this new strain of coronavirus, and they're already fast-tracking results to be able to get another thing. Yes, it is because of pandemics and those sort of things, but I think there will be more push that people will have to align systems, and they will look at it, and they will have people from other industries coming in and looking at it and saying, how can we streamline these things? How can we really look at realizing why we're all in this industry in the first place? To provide cost-effective medicine to help people and aid their lives. That's why I'm in it.
I have a request of you. We're about a half hour into our presentation. Could you skip to a slide that specifically talks about the system that you have? Because we would like to show them how are you going to help us streamline. Presumably that's your point.
Sure. I will expedite the slides a little bit, right? So product information management, as I mentioned, these are important. Without confidence in data accuracy, you cannot really leverage the data you have about your products, right?
And we can always come back to these lead-up slides.
And the next topic is quality management as well. That's something you are familiar with already. And there are IT-related challenges as well, with standalone legacy systems, complex integrations, expensive maintenance, etc., etc. And now I'll go very quickly through the trends as well. First trend, standardization and harmonization. We've mentioned all these aspects before already, so I don't go into much details. End-to-end connectivity. So industry is increasingly looking into, end-to-end coverage from the point solution where we used to be in the past to the common platform and the end holistic solutions to address all aspects of the regulatory systems. Data-driven content and process. So based on common master data, you can leverage this to standardize your data about products, standardize submission content, standardize data submission formats, and unify your procedures. Analytics is a key. Without, taking out the data, the insights and conclusions that drives your business, it's useless.
And I'll have these slides available for you later.
Yeah, end of use, which means nowadays everyone assumes the system needs to be intuitive to use, not very complex to learn. In the end, cloud adoption, which means that practically every solution now has to be offered also in the cloud, if not exclusively in the cloud. And here we are with the solution topic. So our approach to the solution is that, as with many elements of regulatory information management that we went through in the past set of screens, in reality, these are typically just connected through some integrations or interfaces or even manual procedural steps. And an expectation would be those things would work seamlessly together. And that's exactly what we are offering. We are offering these solution modules that seamlessly fit together based on the same platform, covering everything from master data, content, product information, submission tracking, up to the complete interactions with your health authorities.
By the way you've set this up, I have to ask, like the slide before suggested that you start doing this, you have this system, you start doing that, and there's all these modules so that things fit together and you kind of make it work. Mm-hmm. Are you suggesting that with your system you would recommend, or you say, forget about all of that, get rid of all of your systems and replace it with us because we have everything? Because that seems like a big ask of someone to part with all the systems they've cobbled together.
Not at all, not at all. The beauty of the approach is, yes, everything works together, but you can use it and implement it at a pace that somehow is matching your actual business needs and the situation you are. So maybe you can decide to handle first registration tracking, and then your DMS system is going out of date. You want to replace that one as well. You just extend the scope of implementation and with every piece that is implemented, you actually gain efficiency and get more out of it in the end. So you get more synergies out of it. So it's completely modular to implement, just to answer your
it's
question.
Probably beyond what we have time to do here, but I'm pretty naive, relatively speaking, about the topic in terms of, I didn't realize all of the systems that are needed. I think of like regulatory management system, quality management system, PLM system. These are the ones that I have in my head. And I'm seeing all of these subsystems. I'm wondering, maybe from the group, maybe from you, if there's a, you know, in the spirit of you're starting out a business, you need to at least start with this and then this. And I wonder what that order is before you have what seems to be a 15 system puzzle here. 15 systems is 5 times what I had in my head. So I wonder, you know, what are all of the things and the order in which you add them?
Again, I would say this is illustrative. It's about capabilities, not necessarily systems, right? And you can have, you know, 5 capabilities in one system, 3 in the other, etc. So it's illustrative in this matter. Regarding the order, I would maybe leave this discussion to the audience and say, again, I would go to the point I said. It depends on the company. If it's a startup, the needs are different than if it's an established company and maybe replacing a legacy system.
Amplexer has how many employees?
Over 2,000 in general, overall. As a group.
And you've been around for how long?
It's over 30 years.
Okay. And your average customer size?
Typically mid-range. So we are not really addressing small markets. We are not, basically we are occasionally reaching for the, let's say, top pharma, top 20, top 50. We have customers in this region. Of the market, but in general, we are targeting mid-sized companies.
Who do you consider to be your greatest competitors?
Well, it depends on the market, right? It's easier to say in pharma because we're much more present there. But right. Yeah, there are.
And I know that one of the reasons you wanted to talk to my audience is you're making a move more into medical device. You want to make that audience aware of your product offering.
Exactly.
But
so one of the company that is definitely a competitor is Veeva, for example, and there are some others as well that are recently progressing from the pharma coverage to the medical device companies market. Okay. And just to mention how our stack is composed, as we mentioned, our solutions work together seamlessly, but they can be implemented separately, and they're all based on common life sciences master data model. So every piece of information about your products, organization, etc., is leveraged throughout the solutions, and it has a common reporting layer for analytics on the top of it. And the software foundation is the same, and it can be deployed in the cloud or in premise. At the end, we are delivering then a single platform with a single validating environment, with a single user interface where users don't have to learn each time how to use each part, because everything is familiar to them. And with that, we reach seamless connectivity from beginning to the end of the different regulatory process steps.
If either Kim or Gary are willing to come on as panelists, go ahead and raise your hand, because I know that they are also in systems type of management. Well, here comes Gary, so I'm going to assume that's a yes. And I'd love to hear how, if he sees an integration here, or how you would be compatible, and if there's an opportunity to maybe work together. That's part of what I like to do here, bring people together. Let's see, Gary, I probably have to, let's get your camera on. Hey, Gary.
Hi there, Joe. How's things going?
Good. You got a green shirt on today?
I do have a green shirt. I apologize. I didn't know.
I know. You didn't know you were going to get promoted.
My blue shirt.
Gary is my blue shirt guy. Every picture I've seen of him up until now, he's wearing a bright blue shirt. Mr. Thainer, tell us what you've seen today, and are you familiar with the Amplexer suite?
Yes, at a very high level view.
Gary is with ReadTech.
Yes, with ReadTech, been involved with the pharma industry since inception of SPO with the FDA back in 2004, and And I also cross the fence and also work in the medical device space as well. And we serve both those industries with electronic submissions. And actually, I've come across the Amplexner name in various conventions and sales demonstrations in the past, and respect their information. They're very active in some of the industry associations and work groups. But I just wanted to add that I agree with the discussion so far. Did want to mention that there has been some point progress in the pharma space, going back a couple slides, where Health Canada has now moved into some voluntary registration using XML, specifically the SPL format. And there's a lot of future interest in the FHIR standard, the Health Level 7 FHIR standard. So I think things are evolving there. The EMA had an opportunity to consider SPL as a platform to capture information, and yet they opted to use a FHIR standard. They're taking some small steps to get there, but I believe at least in the pharma space, you'll see some migration away from SPL as a particular content structure over to FHIR in the future. But the good news is that there's a lot more emphasis on structured content, whatever the format. And we see a similar trend in the medical device space. So with the advent of MDR and IVDR regulations in Europe, a lot more submission of device registration and UDI reporting, certainly there. We have also noted and actually support China and South Korea. There's two other points in the East there that are making use of electronic machine-to-machine submissions using XML APIs in particular. But we have seen some points of great progress, and yet the industry, I think, is very slow in medical device space in particular to move forward with some of the adoption. But it takes time, and the good news is there is progress, in my opinion, but we're taking some slow steps. And being able to integrate some of these point solutions that we have discussed so far, I think is extremely important, and it's the wave of the future. And you know, be in the background here if you want to ask any questions, but glad to contribute some comments.
I have a question. What are you doing May 10th through the 12th? Renato, Michelle, Rob, they're all coming to 10X. And, you know, I'm just thinking on the spot, maybe we have kind of a panel that seems very outdated, but just have you guys up in front of the room and have a discussion about systems and how to maybe integrate them and maybe brainstorm on some ways to work together. So if you can, Gare, I'd love to have you again. You have to wear your blue shirt.
Oh, all right. All right. Well, I'll have to change my shirt out, but let me get back to you offline. I'll check my calendar and be glad to contribute.
Okay, thanks. All right, I'll put you back in the gallery.
Okay, so let's move to try to close within the time frame that we have here. A brief overview of individual components of the complete suite. So R&D expert is the component about content management, about managing the documentation, fully compliant with all the regulation in this space. Submission experts about compiling your submissions together, reusing documentation that is stored in the same system several times as per the requirements of individual regional authorities. And of course, safekeeping the complete archive of the past. RIM expert is about regulatory planning and tracking, globally, locally, facilitating the oversight of all the regulatory situations across the globe. And product experts is more detailed product information management. It's not just registration information. It's, as we go back to the topic that we started with, maybe on the edge of PLM data, right? As long as it's relevant for submission, like, for example, UDI relevant submission information or MDR relevant submission information to UDAMET, etc. Label expert is a solution that is to manage labeling changes and making sure that their compliance is fully traceable. Quality, that's important. That's not regulatory as is our topic today, but we have a quality solution in this suite as well. And it's covering all the standard requirements of the quality management system and quality document management areas. And here we are with the conclusion. We'll be happy to, you know, come again and maybe go in depth with any of these solutions that we just mentioned. But let's try to summarize maybe the discussion we had so far. So at least in my opinion, there are some strong parallels among the medicinal product and medical device content and data submission process. One of those is definitely that regulations are becoming more stringent, and this is just underlining the value of regulatory systems, in my opinion, because it's basically important to have such a system in place to stay compliant in an efficient manner. There are many capabilities that can be applied to medical device industry as well as they are used in pharma. The solution trends are more or less relevant. We went through some of those. I hope you agree. I don't know, moving into cloud is important, leveraging data is important, end-to-end connectivity is important, etc. And in particular, companies which have combined portfolios of pharma and medical device or even combinational products may have additional benefits from a common platform because there is only one investment basically that they can leverage even better. But nevertheless, there are still differences, and I think we should be fully clear that this is still to be respected. It's not copy-paste exercise. It's not pushing something over the fence as it is. For example, medical devices have such high diversity in terms of different classes and requirements about those classes in terms of regulation. And then is also really lack of global standardization adoption. Yes, there is MDR in Europe and IVDR, etc. There is UDI that is somehow being applied to both US and EU and other regions slowly. But I mean, that's not comparable to the adoption of ECTD, for example, in the pharma world, where basically all major developed regions and countries in the world basically have gradually adopted this standard for submissions. So I'm still to see, you know, how STAD or IMDRF structures are going to be, you know, gradually expanding globally, and this is the right direction probably, and this will help also device companies to be more efficient, to combine and compile their submission files much more easier and reuse documentation across the globe. And there is, of course, the traditional role of PLM and QMS systems not to be discarded. And there is something definitely related to the manufacturing supply chain that PLM is the king of, and we're not touching that part of responsibility. But as long as it goes to the regulatory side, we're happy to help to make it more efficient in connection with PLM as well. So at the end,
I'm sorry, I wanted to invite audience members to raise their hand if they wanted to make a point. Make your last point, because Romuald chose not to come on camera, but I do have a question to read to you when you are finished your last point. Go ahead.
Sure. So we offer the Life Sciences Suite as a holistic solution suite. You pick, you know, of course, what you want to implement first, but as more as you implement, better coverage you get, more efficiency you get. And we have implemented our solution tailored for medical devices in the past for several companies that are using it already. And now we are moving in the direction of offering a standardized off-the-shelf solution for the medical device industry. And that's why we're here to basically discuss this topic as well. Okay, you have a question.
Asks, how does the system implement MDR requirements to help for MDR prep? How does the system collect the data if the data can be automatically represented in required documents in specific submissions? I don't completely understand the question, but perhaps you do.
Okay, yeah. So it's all about the data model, right? So it starts with master data as you start collecting your information about the products. Maybe they're coming from PLM partially, maybe something is entered directly to the system. But this model needs to be compliant with the standards. And as we are basically progressing, we are implementing those standards into our solutions so that at the end they need to comply with the regulation. On the other hand side, that we communicated directly through the electronic data exchange with the UDOMED, for example. I hope that answers the question.
So one of the things that, go ahead, you have another slide here.
No, that's the last slide, basically, yeah. Just to to underline that we help pharma. We are coming from the area with several decades of experience, but along the way, we have served several medical device customers or customers with combined portfolios. And now we are basically putting on the market the solution that is off the shelf, also ready to support medical device needs without additional adjustments. And this would help reduce time to market for new products and the overall effort to ensure sustainable compliance, increase the quality of data, content, documents, and also minimize total cost of ownership. More solutions that are used on the same platform, less the overall.
You likely have some examples of combination products, but half pharma, half medical device, from which to pull. One of the things that I personally, leaving the presentation, don't feel I understand is why we should choose you versus a competitive system. Now, you've made some points that I imagine most of your competitors could make. We're integrated, we're holistic, you can bring them together, we're across the whole thing. I don't have a good sense of what it would take to adopt your system, what challenges I might face. You know, as I say, you know, I go to my boss and I say, oh, I saw this amazing presentation from Amplexer. We really need to look at that. And is the response going to be, you know, okay, I'm going to need them to fill in an RFP and bring in all the vendors, and this is a major decision, you know, that kind of thing. I don't have a sense of how you would fare in that kind of question, or what would be involved. Can you help a little bit in the closing moments?
Sure. So definitely we are focused on this industry, and we understand the business needs. We understand the business requirements. We have staff that is coming from the industry, which is part of our teams that are constantly monitoring the regulation changes and making sure this is fully implemented into the solution. And we have the record track of implementations within the both areas of industries, and these have been helping the companies for many years already to succeed in this. And we have good feedback from them that this really helped them to improve efficiency, ensure data standardization, making sure that the data quality has increased, and with that they really improved the outputs in terms of regulatory compliance and time to market. So that's, I would say, the best output that can be achieved in the end, right? And in the end, of course, we're not just offering the solution, we are also offering implementation services. We have a large team of implementation consultants and project managers that basically lead the implementation and implement it in an efficient manner, either in our cloud offering or on premises if the customer decides to use that mode of implementation.
Okay, fair enough. Romuald has another question. I'm going to try once again to promote two panelists to see if we can get them on camera. And if not, he writes, the RPS schema for TD was implemented in this system. I don't know what those acronyms mean. Do you?
So RPS is probably standing for the IMDRF submission structure, or STAT in the previous abbreviation. So that's the
yes.
Yeah, okay. So that's something that will be covered for sure in the off-the-shelf implementation. And we have some implementation of the customers that already use such a structure.
Okay. Well, should we choose to do another one of these, or perhaps when we're in person together at 10X, I wouldn't mind seeing some of the actual screens and understanding kind of what the experience would be like.
Good. That was really an introductory session to get familiar with the offering, and for sure we will be able to deep dive into, hopefully in the next periods, in the individual upgrades.
We are finishing 2021 in a very regulatory note. Next week, Basil Akra is our guest, and he'll be talking about notified body capacity and how to manage the scarcity of getting one to even work with you these days. And the following week, as you saw, Rob will be our guest. He's going to talk about quality system changes for Canadian MDR. So, and then the last 2 weeks of the year, we're gonna give you time off to enjoy Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. I'm thinking it'd be pretty hard to attract an audience when they're all eggnogged up, if you know what I mean. And then we'll start again in 2022. Renato, thank you very much. Thank you for our guests, especially those who came on camera and contributed. And we will see you next week. Renato, I'll reach out to you separately.
Thank you, Joe, for hosting us.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye for now.